Okay, all right. I'm going to make a comment on something before I start. I see brother Gibson is in the room now. He said he doesn't have a microphone or video, so he can't respond to me. Sometimes that's good too, because it saves us from getting into arguments. But anyway, I just want to explain something I said last week. There was a discussion with Brother Frederick about the wilderness, and Brother Frederick gave a certain interpretation to the wilderness. And I was saying that, no, it doesn't mean this all the time. And I made reference to Revelation 12, where it says that the woman went into the wilderness where she has a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there. So I made the point that it's clear from this statement that the word wilderness is not always a negative place. I think because of this, Brother Gibson interpreted that what I was saying is that the wilderness is a good place, but this is not what I believe. I just want to clear that up, because I believe that the wilderness represents, in some cases, a place of a desolate place, right? A place that is, I mean, I understand the bottomless pit to be, and I think that's what we were focusing. I understand the bottomless pit to be a place where the Spirit of God has been removed, a place where God's activity has ceased. That's what I believe the bottomless pit to represent. And I don't think that that represents the wilderness all the time. That's the point I was making. So while in some cases, the scapegoat is released into the wilderness, for example, in Leviticus, when he talks about the Day of Atonement, the scapegoat is taken away into the wilderness. And wilderness there clearly represents a place away from God, away from the presence of God, comparable to where Satan is put in the bottomless pit. But I was saying I don't think this is always the meaning of wilderness. So that's the point I was making. I was not saying that every time you see wilderness, it means somewhere where somebody is blessed. But I believe when you look at Revelation 12, I know that you, Brother Gibson, and maybe some others have a different interpretation. You understand that the church went into the wilderness and there she became an evil thing. She became the prostitute. Maybe I have to look at that more closely, but I'm not settled about that. But what I know the Bible says is that the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle. This represents God's protection, God's guidance. And she fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared of God. I'm going to give you another interpretation of that. When God took Israel out of Egypt, God said that he bore them on eagle's wings in Exodus 19. And about verse 4, God says, you see how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. And what God actually was saying, that he carried Israel out of Egypt on the wings of an eagle. And where did he bring them? He brought them into the wilderness. So I believe that what he's saying is that what we are seeing in Revelation chapter 12 is an antitypical event, an antitypical event of the Exodus. The woman is carried away on eagle's wings and she is brought into the wilderness. Now, when Israel went into the wilderness, what they did, what they came there for, they were under God's protection, they were under God's teaching, under God's schooling, but it was barren and desolate times. That's what happened in the wilderness. So I think Revelation is kind of reflecting that same situation. So the wilderness where the woman was fled for 1260 days is the counterpart of the wilderness where God took Israel when she came out of Egypt. Same thing, I carried you on eagle's wings. So that's my thought on that particular wilderness. I still don't agree that the word wilderness is always a negative thing, that it means an evil place. I don't think I can justifiably say that looking at the Bible. One other thing that you mentioned that I also want to comment on, you said that it's kind of it's foolish to believe that the woman in Revelation 12 is Mary. And I agree with you. I don't know if that was a reflection on something that I said or I believe, but I don't believe that. I don't believe that woman is Mary. And I don't believe that that Satan was cast out of heaven 4,000 years before. You mentioned a few things in your email, but that is one of the things you said. It's nonsense to believe that in Revelation God is going back to creation to say Satan was cast out. I agree with you. I think maybe you weren't with us when we were going through Revelation 12, and so you probably make some assumptions about what I believe. But I don't believe Satan was cast out of heaven. I don't believe Revelation 12 is talking about Satan being cast out of heaven back there at creation. No, it's talking about Satan being cast out of heaven after Jesus goes back to heaven in AD 31. That's when the dragon was cast out of heaven. And the woman there does not represent Mary by any means. This woman is a symbol of the church or the people of God, the Israel that brought forth the Messiah. Jesus came from the church. Literally, he came through Mary. But the bigger picture, the prophetic picture, is that he was brought forth from Israel. He was brought forth from the church, or from the people of God, if you prefer. And the people of God were Israel. And so that woman represents Israel. And we look at Israel as an Old Testament institution that morphed into the New Testament church, which is a different organization, a different kind of body, but at the same time, in a sense, it's a continuation of God's system. She brought forth the Messiah, then she was persecuted. So I just wanted to clear up those 2 points in terms of what I believe. I'm not asking you or anybody to adjust your beliefs because I say so, but I just like you to understand my beliefs properly so that you can know where I'm coming from. All right. So having said that, I'm going to continue with today's study where we are in the first few verses of Revelation 17. And what I'm going to do is just do a quick rehearsal of what we looked at last week, and then we will pick up from there for this evening. Now let's go to the Bible. Okay. We're in Revelation chapter 17. And last week, we looked at we saw this woman sitting on this beast. And what we pointed out is that we are looking at an event that the Bible refers to as the judgment of the great whore. That's what the angel says to John, the angel with the plague. He says to John, come, I'm going to show you the judgment. Now, we don't see the judgment immediately. What we see is, first of all, some history of this woman. We actually see the judgment of the whore, I believe, in Revelation 18, where she's burned and the merchants of the earth are wailing and they see the smoke, her smoke going up and all that. That's chapter 18. But in chapter 17, what the angel does, first of all, is give us some background about this woman and her alliance with this beast. We're told that the kings of the earth have committed fornication with this woman, and we emphasized, it is clear, that this woman is a religious body, a religious entity, and adultery in this sense means that this religious entity, this church, should have been unique in her affection for the Lord. She should have been faithful, focused on her affection for the Lord, but instead she has poured her affection upon the kings of the earth. She's a popular worldly agency, a worldly power. That's her characteristic, and so that's why God accuses her of whoredom or prostitution. What we saw also is that because of her fornication, she has produced a wine that people have become drunk by drinking it. And what we see this means is that the doctrines, the teachings, the influence of this institution have caused the people of the world to become totally disoriented, totally confused as far as the true things are concerned. Nobody understands Christianity. Nobody understands true Christianity. Nobody understands God. Nobody understands his ways because of Babylon. Her wine has maddened, confused, blinded the inhabitants of the earth. And that wine is a product of her fornication. There is a lesson there. There is a deep-rooted lesson for all of us, brothers and sisters, and it's a lesson I hope we will learn. Some people might wonder why I am so strongly against Christians being involved in politics. Even I don't tell people what to do with their franchise and their right, but I tell you, I voted once when I was 18 years old, and I forgive myself because I didn't have any sense. First of all, I wasn't a Christian, and secondly, I was very young and inexperienced. But I've never gone near. I've never had any interest in voting after that because I became a Christian when I was 22, and from the time I became a Christian, the ways of the world were always dark in my mind. I always saw them as dark territory. People say, well, this party is better than that party. I don't know. Some of us, maybe people have the gift of prophecy, but I think, anyway, always difficult when you get into political issues. But the point I'm making is Babylon's problem is that she chooses political sides. Babylon's problem is that she thinks these beast powers, she thinks these beast powers have something to offer in terms of the kingdom of God. That is Babylon's problem. That is why she commits fornication with the kings of the earth. And that is why her doctrines have become perverted and dark. I always drift a little bit, but I can't help it. When you look at the churches today, why do you think some of them are now ordaining female pastors? Why do you think some of them are ordaining transgender elders? Why do you think some of them are ordaining homosexual priests? Why do you think many of them are now supporting gay marriage? Christian, so-called Christian churches. Why do you think? Because fornication has blinded their eyes. They have confused the world, and the world confuses them. That's the danger of becoming tied up with politics. There's a brother. I won't say too much about him because I might give away his identity, but this brother is constantly sending me videos, and I made them as he is a strong supporter of Donald Trump, to the point almost, in my opinion, of worship, almost to the point of worship. And he bombards me with these videos. I am kind of too polite to block him, but he bombards me with these videos. One day he sent 20 videos at one time. I mean, I have absolutely no time to watch this, but at the same time, he keeps sending messages like the man of God appeared, and the Christian world rejected him, and we will deeply regret that we never stood by God's appointed man. And I don't respond because to be honest, I don't want to get into political sides, but this brother, what I'm saying is that this brother is a Christian, and he is so. What I really said to him the day when I engaged him, I never spoke for Trump or against Trump. I simply said, man, the word of God says that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and he gives it to whoever he will. If he gives it to Donald Trump, I'm satisfied. If he gives it to Joe Biden, I'm satisfied, because my God is sovereign. That's what the Bible says. No, 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 no. That's not how God does things. God wants us to be engaged and so forth. And he won't accept any thought that God is able to do his will without my help. But the point I'm making is when people become so locked into political issues, how can you remain unaffected? How can you prevent your doctrines from changing to suit your political ideology? Now I know it's on the other side. I know they are the other crazy ones who are supporting Joe Biden equally, right? And I believe that the one party is into homosexual, pushing the homosexual agenda and abortion and other things unmentionable. There are parties into pushing Zionism and the political kingdom of God on earth, and they're pushing it, and maybe they're even involved in a bit of racism. These things are not our portfolio. They're not our portfolio. They're not the battles that God gives us to fight. And when we start fighting these battles, our theology will adjust to suit the causes that we have embraced. That is the real problem of Babylon. And what has been the consequence? Babylon has become heavily favored. She's decked with purple and scarlet. She has become royalty in the world. I mean, some of these religious institutions, there's no king who has lived as royally as these people. Some of these false prophets, I mean, one of them I saw has 3 private jets. One of the time there was a scandal of one of them that had an air-conditioned doghouse. Forget which one that was. But anyway, but they live more lavishly than the rich people of the world. And so we see Babylon decked with gold, precious stones, pearls. It's a picture of prosperity, of worldly prosperity, worldly glory. And we saw that this woman, the name given to her is Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. The woman is drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. So what we saw, what we pointed out, what I tried to present is that this woman is it represents the accumulated false religion of the ages. It's not just some of our brothers and sisters would isolate this woman to the Roman Catholic Church. And they will present many evidences to say that this is the papacy. And I fully agree that it embraces Catholicism, includes Catholicism. But when you look at what it says about her, it cannot be limited to Catholicism. Why? Because it says, we looked at Revelation 18 and the last verse when it says, in her was found the blood of all that were slain upon the earth. You can say Catholicism has been guilty of shedding much innocent blood, but you can't say it's guilty of all blood, all the blood of God's people. You have to go back and look at Jerusalem. We did that. We saw that Jesus said that in Jerusalem there was found the blood of all that were slain, of all the righteous people that were killed from the time of Abel. This was in Jerusalem. And now here Babylon is given the same blame. So clearly Jerusalem in the time of Jesus is a part of this Babylon. So what we're looking at is false religion going back across the ages. And this system of false religion originated, it really took root and developed at the Tower of Babel. That's what I believe we can see when we look at the Bible. When they came out of the ark after the flood, the first system of false religion began at the Tower of Babel. There, their language was confused. And the people who migrated from Babel carrying the different languages, they traveled all over the planet carrying their false religion with them. This is the foundation of Babylon. Sometimes it became more prominent in places like Egypt, Assyria, Babylon itself, literal Babylon, Rome, Greece, but the same elemental principles of Babylon. The idea of establishing a civil system of religion. When I say civil, that's not the right word. A national system of religion, a system of religion that that captured the minds of the people and bound the people in false ideas. These are the principles of Babylon. As we saw, the 3 things that Babylon stood for way back at the Tower of Babel. Let us make us a tower to reach unto heaven. Babylon is man's way of building his own way to God. Babylon is man's way, finding his own way to God, building a tower to reach to heaven. It's human designed salvation. That's Babylon. Secondly, lest we be scattered abroad. Secondly is the idea of centralization. gathering people together under one centralized power and authority where they can be more easily controlled. And thirdly, the principle, let us make a name for ourselves. These are the three elements of Babylon. Building your own way to heaven, making a name for yourself, and a system of centralized authority. This is Babylon. And if you think about it, it's the great way of controlling people. It's a great way to control people. When I was a teacher many years ago, they came and they wanted me to join the teachers union, and I told them I didn't want to be a part of it. And they said, when we get a raise the next time, we're not going to give you any of it. I mean, the guy didn't have the power to do it, but he was telling me that, and I said, go ahead, fine, because one of the things I read in the Bible where it says, be content with your wages. Okay, I don't know where anybody stands on that, but you see, the thing is, do you depend on your boss or on your government or on your union for your wages? If that is what you depend on, you better get another job. We depend on our God to provide for us. Okay, so anyway, what I've found out is that when you belong to a youth club, which I belong to, when you belong to a union, when you belong to a political party, when you belong to a denomination, you lose control of your sovereignty. Somebody else determines for you how you behave, what you do, where you stand. You become responsible for the activities of others when you belong. This is the danger of congregating people into factions, of people joining themselves into factions. First of all, when you get into a mob, you lose your sense. Mobs don't have any sense. And communal organizations are the same way, right? One person gets up and says, let us attack the state capital. Okay, and a few people get up, and then a few geese run in and they follow behind the mob, and everybody gets into trouble, and you say, you know, I didn't really intend to do this. But you end up there because you are following everybody. I never forget years ago I read about the lemmings in Norway. If you ever heard about the lemmings, every few years they start running. There are some little animals like gophers or rats or some little animals that live in holes in the ground. But they multiply and they breed until they come to millions. And then for some reason, nobody can understand, every few years you have a lemming run. They start running and nobody knows why. And they run and they run and they run. They say that all the animals of prey, the foxes and the eagles and the hawks, they come out and they have a feast. But these animals still keep running, and finally they come to the edge of the cliff, the edge of the ocean. What do? They hesitate for a little and then they start jumping in. And they just jump in, and those at the back are following the others, and they jump into the water and they just keep going, and they just run into the water and they drown. Millions of lemmings, and no reason, but they just start following each other. And when I read it, I thought to myself, man, I'm not going to be a lemming. Anywhere I see everybody running, I'm going to run in the other direction. I was in Australia and I heard, I was on a sheep farm with Sister Glennis Walcom and her daughter Jessica. But they told me an interesting story. We were talking about sheep because it's a sheep farm. I got a little experience going out with a bike and trying to herd the sheep and all of that. But they said they told me how sheep just follow whoever is in front of them. And they said one day they have a little kind of driveway at the front that goes around. In the middle, there's a kind of flower bed, flowers, a section where you have flowers, and the driveway just goes around the flower thing and goes back out. And they came out and they found the sheep going round and round that flower bed, round and round, over and over and over. What happened? One of these silly sheep started going around, and the one behind followed him, and he went around to the other side where he ended up behind the last one. So he started following the last one The last one was following the one in front. Everybody was following somebody else, and all the sheep were going round and round and round in a circle, following each other. And after a while, they had to come out and chase the silly sheep away. And it reminds me of people, and it reminds me of what happens when people get into groups, into crowds. They stop thinking. And I'm going through all this long story because what I want to say is that Babylon's principle of gathering people together and bringing them under centralized authority is the same principle. It's a system that is designed to stop you from thinking and to make you become a reflector, an absorber of the thinking of other people. Somebody who is cynical might say, Brother David, you are doing the same thing because here you are and here are all these people who are listening to you. It's very different. It's because it's different why Brother Gibson can say, Brother David, I don't agree with you. It's because it's different why Brother Frederick can say, Brother David, I differ from you here. What do? We disfellowship these brothers? No, that belongs to Babylon. Do we say you can't come to our fellowship anymore? No. I believe there is a difference, and this difference is simply that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. We share our ideas, but we're not setting up a system of control. And essentially, this is what Babylon is. It's a system of control. It's a system of cloning minds. So everybody follows behind everybody else. So this is the principle of Babylon that we saw. And John is amazed because this woman has been guilty of murdering the people of God, and yet she apparently is some kind of pseudo-religious institution. So he's marveling when he sees her. He says, I wondered with great admiration, great amazement. So in verse 7, which is about where we are now, it says, and the angel said unto me, wherefore didst thou marvel? Why were you amazed? All right, I'm going to explain to you how this comes to be. I'm going to tell you the secret of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. So then we come to verse 8, which I think is about where we are at the moment. So we're going to take our time now. It says, the beast that you saw was and is not. So this entire chapter has been one of the really difficult chapters in the entire Bible. It's hard, it's difficult in the book of Revelation, it's difficult in the Bible. I would put it on the same level as Daniel 11, where it talks about the king of the north and the south, the last part there. But let's see if we can come up with some kind of idea that makes sense. Now, when he says the beast was and is not, clearly we are at a certain point in time. This cannot be true in all ages because it's time defined. It's time defined because the beast was. If it was, then that is in the past. And it now is not. That's in the present. And it shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. That is the future. So this puts us in a time space, and we say, okay, so the angel is talking to John in a space of time. And a part of the question that we have in our minds is, what time are we looking at? I'm not sure how important it is, but it's an interesting question because, I mean, obviously we are looking at one of two times. Either it is the time of John or it is the time of the judgment. Okay, because he's talking to John in the context of the present. And when is the present? Is it when John is living back in AD, about AD 95? It would have been about this time. Is this a point in time? Or is it down at the end of time during the time of the plagues? It probably is round about the time of the plagues, in my opinion, because it's the angel who has the vial who comes to John and says, look, I'm going to show you the judgment of the beast. So he carries John into the wilderness where he sees this beast. And at this point in time, The woman is drunken with the blood of the saints. And it's in this context that the angel is explaining this beast. And he says, the beast you saw once existed. Presently, it does not exist. And it shall arise out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. So it's mysterious because it says that the beast presently is not. And I'm going to say we have to adjust that a little bit. Because when you look at the entire prophecy, it's clear that what he means is that the beast has become dormant. Not that it doesn't exist, but that it doesn't exist in a certain form. Remember, if we go down a little further, it's talking about the 7 kings. It says there are 7 kings in verse 10. There are 7 kings. 5 have fallen. 1 is, and the other is not yet come. So you have the heads kind of corresponding to the beast. 7 kings would correspond to 5 fallen would correspond to the beast was. 1 is would correspond to the beast is not. 1 is not yet come would seem to correspond to the beast coming from the bottomless pit. But I don't think it's exactly that way. There's some discrepancy. But at the same time, you have 2 situations where we are given a look at the past, the present, and the future. So why do I say that the beast? I think the beast is dormant instead of dead, because the woman is riding the beast, and there's no time that she's not riding the beast. And the 7 horns are on the beast, and there's no the 7 heads. The 7 heads are on the beast, and there's no time that they are not on the beast. There's always the beast because there's always a head. So it's not like you have a head without a beast. The beast is always there, but the head is representing the beast at that point in time. So even when it says the beast is not, it means that the beast has lost some important element of its identity. So it doesn't appear, it's dormant, but it is still there. That's what I understand it to be. Because a little later on, see, there's another explanation. Let me see. Where is it? Yeah, it's the same verse, verse 8. It says, they will behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. Well, some translations have it, the beast that was and is not and yet is to come. All right, but if we even accept this, let me say something. We ask ourselves, what is the main characteristic of this beast that you could say the beast is not, and then the beast re-emerges? Does it? What is the beast? If you look at the beast, you understand that the beast is a composite of great empires going back across the ages. When we looked at Revelation 13, we discussed this. We saw that the beast has 7 heads, and these 7 heads represent the 7 great empires that Satan uses in his warfare against God and his people. I said that as perfectly as I want to say it. Let me repeat it. The beast represents the 7 great empires that Satan uses in his warfare against God and his people. And once you understand this, you can always identify the beast. You can go back in time and you can see that the first great empire that Satan used to try to destroy God's people was Egypt. The next one he used was Assyria, which succeeded in destroying the 10 tribes. The next one he used was Babylon, which enslaved Israel for 70 years. Then you have the Greeks, who defiled the temple and offered swine's blood on the altar in the temple, and had great warfare with the Maccabean brothers. You had Medo-Persia before that, which it was under Medo-Persia that Haman got the king to make a death decree against the Jews that God miraculously saved them from. Every one of these empires made an attempt to wipe out God's professing people. Rome actually succeeded, destroyed the nation of Israel in AD 70 and scattered them to the four winds. So the beast is essentially the tool of the dragon. It's a tool of Satan. It's the agency that Satan uses to destroy God's people. So anywhere you see the beast, you see persecution of God's people. So do we see the beast today? This is why I say that the beast is, but he's dormant. This is why the Bible says that the beast is not, because the persecution of God's people has stopped for some time. Well, at least in the Western world. Let me put it that way. I know that in China, Korea, North Korea, Islamic countries, the persecution of Christians has not stopped. But at the same time, remember, the beast is essentially a Western power. It's a power that is focused on Europe and the Middle East. Europe, North Africa, the Middle East. That is the territory where the beast has always manifested himself. You go from Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, Rome. It's always been Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. That part of the world, what we call the ancient world. That's where the beast is focused. So the persecution of Christians in that part of the world is no longer being done by the beast. So in this sense, the beast is not. But the beast still is, because the political structure that made up the beast, that makes up the beast, it still exists. In other words, Europe and the nations around, they have not been wiped out. They still exist. But the persecuting nature of the beast no longer is there. So the beast is said to be in a state of is not. But notice the ominous words. He shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. What this is saying is that the destructive, persecuting nature of the beast is to be restored. So we have a moment when it seems like the beast is not, because there is no persecution of God's people. But then there comes a time when the condition on the earth can be described as the bottomless pit, and at that time the true nature of the beast will appear. Now remember, let's look back at something very quickly. I just want to remind you of something. Revelation 13, we go back there, and I want you to notice something. Let me go back to chapter 12, the last verse of chapter 12. It says, the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. So what is Satan's purpose? His purpose is war against God's people. He has no other purpose, no other agenda, no other business. When he gets up in the morning, he doesn't have to go to work like you and I. He doesn't have to answer to a boss. He sits down and he plans night and day, and he has one purpose in mind. I don't know if demons eat food. I don't know what kind of food they would eat, but they don't need to work for their bread. Their business from morning to night is to sit down and plan how to destroy God's people. Now, we pointed out in one of these studies that the devil normally does not have the power to attack you physically. They live in the realm of the spirit, and they don't have the power to cross that barrier. So we don't need to be so much afraid of ghosts, duppies, as we say in Jamaica. They have the power to frighten people, but they don't really have the power to attack you physically, unless you are deep into spiritism. But what Satan does, and his agenda, is to work through agencies to influence the minds of men, so that men do his work. So the agencies that Satan uses to destroy God's people is human agencies. So we need to be afraid we need to be aware of the work of these human institutions, because they are the tools of Satan. So when you go to chapter 13, look at what it says. Remember Satan's job, to destroy God's people. It says, the beast came up out of the sea, and it says, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. For what purpose? Remember, Satan's purpose is the destruction of God's people. So whoever this beast is, his purpose in prophecy, his purpose in Satan's economy is to destroy God's people. So there's no other reason why this beast exists, why Satan has brought him into power and given him his Satan's power, his Satan's place at the head of the world, and his great authority. There's no reason except to destroy God's people. So when we come to a period of time like today, when the beast is not destroying God's people, this is why we can say that the beast is not. This is why the Bible says that the beast is not, because if he's not destroying God's people, then obviously he doesn't exist. So there's a period when the beast seems to disappear. Remember, the main characteristic of the beast is not his political structure so much, it's his persecuting nature, because that's his portfolio. So when the beast is no longer persecuting God's people, then you can say that the beast is not. And that's what I believe we are looking at here in chapter 17, when it says the beast you saw was and is not, but he is too. But notice, he shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. And what does this mean? It's a statement that in Europe, this persecuting agency is to re-emerge. It is to ascend out of the bottomless pit. Now look at the phrase, the bottomless pit. I don't know, we have been through this a few times. I don't know if I need to do it again, but you can go to Revelation chapter 8, Revelation chapter 11, Revelation chapter 17 here, and you can go to Revelation 20, and you'll find the phrase, the bottomless pit. It appears 4 times in the book of Revelation. And the characteristic that we find is that this bottomless pit refers to a condition where the Spirit of God is no longer working. Maybe I just need to demonstrate that. Let me look for this phrase and just look at it and see if we. I think we touched on it last week as well. But I always like to Revelation 9, not 8, Revelation 9, verses 1 and 2. I saw, and the 5th angel sounded, and as we pointed out, the sounding of the angels represents a time after the close of probation. It's the 7 last plagues under the trumpets. All right, the angel blows his trumpet, and there's a star falls from heaven to the earth, and to him it was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit as the smoke of a great furnace. And it says, locusts came upon the earth. Now, whatever this means, as we look at the bottomless pit, we can see that when it is opened, terrible things begin to happen on the earth. We have heard the simplistic explanation that this bottomless pit is some kind of hole in the ground. You know, not so long ago, I was looking at some videos where they were talking about this thing they build between Austria and this thing called CERN. I don't know if some of us have heard of CERN, but it's a particle accelerator that they have been using to. What are they doing with it? They are trying to do some explorations on the very nature of matter, but they are trying to split. It's not the atom. It's a little bit more than that, but it's a device that is many miles big. They have built it right on the border of Austria and Belgium, I think, or France, Austria and France, or Austria and Belgium. But you know, people.
Isn't it Switzerland in the Swiss tunnel?
It could be somewhere on the border, but the Switzerland tunnel is a little bit different. But it's this CERN is some scientific device that cost millions, maybe billions of dollars to build. There's something about Europe that I can't quite figure out, because one of the things that it seems is that they are trying to use this as a means of building some kind of connection with the supernatural world. And Switzerland is where they built a tunnel 17 miles long, the longest tunnel in the world. And it's strange because when they opened this tunnel, they had a spiritualistic ceremony, very, very strange and very, very. If you look at it on YouTube, you'll see where they have images of demons. The heads of state from Europe gathered at the spot, and they have demons dancing. They have figures of dead people, like ghost-like figures, and strange ceremonies, something rank with paganism. If you ever go and look at the opening of the tunnel in Austria, and you wonder why would people do things like this, but the point is, some people have been saying that maybe this is a way that the bottomless pit will be opened. And what they are doing is suggesting that the bottomless pit is some kind of place where demons are locked up, and that these experiments that men are doing will actually open a portal to let these demons into the physical world. So they think that these locusts might represent an actual demonic invasion. But I'm not really supporting that point of view. What I really believe is that the bottomless pit represents not so much a physical place. It represents a spiritual condition, because we are dealing with the book of Revelation, where physical images are used to represent spiritual things. In most cases, we see, like, for example, you see a woman who is a prostitute, and the Bible says she has committed fornication. What are you looking for? A woman who strips herself naked and goes to bed with another man, with other men? No, it's spiritual. There's no actual intermingling of two bodies involved. What is involved is the exchange of ideas, corrupted ideas, because of association between two entities. So what I'm saying is we are looking for a spiritual interpretation for most of these things. So the bottomless pit, you ask yourself, what is the spiritual implication of an abyss or a bottomless pit? If you ever fell into a bottomless pit, it's obvious you would never stop falling. There would never be any hope for you of ever getting out. And I believe that this is the meaning of the bottomless pit here. Spiritually, when you fall into a bottomless pit, you will never stop falling. What do you call that condition where a person gets into a spiritual state where he falls and he never stops falling? What do you call that condition? Obviously, we refer to it.
Backsliding.
You can turn around and come back.
Close.
Right.
Lost forever.
It's a hopeless condition. It's like completely
Hopelessness.
satanic.
Absolutely. The only time you ever start falling spiritually and you can never turn around is when there is a close of probation. Sometimes we refer to it as the end of grace. We understand that this happens to individual people sometimes, rarely, but there's a time when it happens to the planet. There's a time when the preaching of the gospel has gone to everybody. The Spirit of God has appealed to every heart, and men have made up their minds. And God says, I cannot do anything more for this planet. And God's Spirit stops working with the hearts of the unrepentant. Then we are going to see what people are like when they have rejected God. Then we are going to see humanity in its true godless nature let loose on this planet. It's going to be the most frightening time that we have ever experienced. Now that I understand it better, I don't know what I want. When I was a young Christian, I was dying for the time of trouble. I wanted it to come. I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to stand up and suffer something for the cause, and I was looking forward to it. Now that I understand it a little better, some of my zeal has dissipated. I'm thinking, God, if I can avoid it, I mean, I know there's a wonderful reward for the 144,000, which I love, but I wonder what it is like to live through that time and to see your brother or your sister on the other side. What is it like to live through that time and see any of your children on the other side? What is it like to live through that time and go to the place where right now I don't plan to travel in the near future because they're saying you have to have the vaccination. They are planning for you to have a vaccination passport. And I'm not prepared for that. But what if you need it to go to the, my wife and I were talking about this the other day. And we were talking about the fact that right now, most of us live from the supermarket or from the public market. Because of this COVID thing, in Jamaica, they bring out the markets. People lay out their food on the floor. You can go there and people lay out their goods on the floor, and you walk into the market and buy. I hear the government talking about bringing in more restrictions on the market because the COVID thing is going up. The market is a place where, if you talk about social distancing, the market is a place where, if that were an issue, it would be a place where it really is a place for spreading it, because people just rub shoulders. There are masses of people in the market all the time. They go there to buy the yams and the potatoes and the greens and to me, everything. It's there laid out. And where I see them heading with this thing is to lock down the places where people happen to meet each other little by little. And if all of this happens, and what if you are required to receive the mark of the beast to do your shopping? They say you should find a place and plant something. How many people have a little place where you can plant something? Some of us live in the city. You're going to plant? Plant where? Plant what? And if you plant something, how long is it going to last you? I don't know how long this time of trouble is going to last. From all accounts, it seems like it's going to be a few years. So anyway, what I'm saying is, it's not going to be a bed of roses. It's not going to be a piece of cake. When Jesus talks about it, he says, if it were possible, even the elect would be saved. He said, if it were possible, no flesh would be saved. I'm sorry, he said, if it were possible, the elect would be deceived. He said, if God did not shorten the time, no flesh would be saved. He says it will be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. So it's going to be frightening, because it is the bottomless pit conditions. It is the condition where the Spirit of God has left planet Earth. Apart from God's people, the Spirit has left the earth. And if you think people are wicked today, you're going to see something else when that time comes. So this is the meaning of the bottomless pit. It appears here in Revelation 11. It says that the beast from the bottomless pit. In Revelation 17, it says the beast from the bottomless pit. In Revelation 20, it says Satan was cast into the bottomless pit. So it's a condition where the Spirit of God has abandoned the situation. The Spirit of God is not there. So what it tells me is that in Europe and in the rest of the world, but we are focused on Europe here, when probation closes, when the Spirit of God leaves the earth, the beast is going to come back to his condition. And remember what that condition is. It's a condition of persecution of God's people. That's what brings the beast back to life. He comes back to his destiny. He comes back to the purpose that he was designed for. Because Satan designed this beast to make war on God's people. So now the Spirit of God is gone. For a time, the beast has been kept under restraint. Maybe the four angels were holding the winds. Now the beast is loosed because the Spirit of God is gone, and the beast comes out of the bottomless pit. And you see, we have said before, and I'm going to still hold to this, that this beast represents a system of government, that is completely divorced from God. Not only in the sense that the Spirit of God is gone, but also in the sense that it is probably an atheistic power. Now, when I say atheistic, it's tempting for me to go further and say a communistic power. I'm not going to go so far as to say communistic, because people associate communism with places like Cuba and Russia and places. I'm focusing more on atheism than communism, because for me, communism is a system that involves several things, but atheism is a system where you reject the knowledge of God. And there are many who are not communists and they are atheists. There are many who are not communists, but they are atheists. So I'm focusing more on atheism. Why do I say this beast is a godless power? Well, because the beast, first of all, hates Christians because it persecutes Christians. That's number one. Secondly, the same beast through the 10 horns will attack false Christianity. It will attack false Christianity. So clearly, it is against Christianity. Probably it will attack all religion. It is against Christianity. It is against religion. Ultimately, it sets out to destroy religion. And it actually devastates and loots Babylon. The 10 horns will hate the whore, will make her naked. Let me just read it. Verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Whatever we understand this to be, what it is telling us is that the 10 horns, which are a part of the beast, the 10 horns are going to attack the prostitute who has been their fornicating companion for all these years. At the end, this beast, when it comes from the bottomless pit, is different than it has ever been before, because this is the first time that the beast will come from the bottomless pit. Every time it appeared, it was bad, but it was never so bad because the Spirit of God was still at work. But the withdrawing of the Spirit of God makes the beast worse than it has ever been. And so it sets out to destroy religion. It attacks Babylon, destroys Babylon, or devastates her very badly. And it tries to destroy the people of God, although God protects them. So this beast is in a condition that is worse than it has ever been in all of its career. And this is what it means that it comes from the bottomless pit. So if you look at the world today, I keep saying this every time we come on this subject, but it's because it is so glaring. It's so glaring. You don't have to have special eyes to see that this is the first time in the history of the world that a planet has ever been at this place. If it was at this place before, it was before the flood. We don't know what conditions were like in detail, but it might have been that they got to this place before the flood. But look at what is happening. For the past 200 years, the world has been systematically growing in the doctrine of evolution. Because of this, we live in an age where for the first time in the history of the human race, we have more atheists than we have ever had before. Atheism has grown by leaps and bounds. There are entire nations where it is illegal to talk about God. North Korea, for example, don't talk about God. China is officially atheistic. Russia, officially, the Soviet Union, the entire Soviet Union was so. Cuba. These are places where atheism has become state embedded. But among those nations where atheism is not officially embraced, it still is there implicitly. I read statistics that tell me that in Sweden, the rate of atheism was 84%. In England, it has passed 50%. In Germany, in France, in the European countries, atheism is deeply embedded in the psyche of the nations. America, it's growing. Australia, New Zealand, the developed countries have embraced evolution and atheism, and in the countries that are not yet so highly developed, it is still advancing by leaps and bounds because of the educational system. Also in Christian universities and colleges, because they are forcing people to teach this erroneous, stupid doctrine of evolution. So, in this way, Satan has found a way to destroy the knowledge of God and to get God out of the thinking of people. It's kind of fascinating to me. Every now and then I get on YouTube and I try to look for atheists who convert to Christianity. And you will find some unusual atheists, like one of them named Anthony Flew, one of the most famous atheists. When he was an old man and before he died, he never became a Christian, but he became a believer in God. Because of what? Because of DNA. DNA. One of these days I'm going to do a study on DNA. It's going to be science. It's not going to be the Bible. But I learned about DNA when I was a grown man. I did biology to third form in school, but I never paid much attention and I never learned much. But when I was a grown man, I did some biology, and then not too long ago I started to study DNA. I was blown away. I was blown away. I don't think I have a special mind. I don't think I have an especially curious mind. But I ask myself when I look at it, why, how is it possible that anybody can look at this and believe that there is not a God? How is it possible? One day I'm going to do a study on it so you can understand what I mean. It's like out of nowhere, you found a library of books. You know, libraries are made up of books, and books are made up of chapters, and chapters are made up of paragraphs, and paragraphs are made up of sentences, and sentences are made up of words, and words are made up of letters, and letters are made up of shapes. When you find a library, you know that you have found something sophisticated, something that is the work, is a very complicated work. You and I, we don't understand the wonders of language because we grow with it. It comes to us naturally. But if you ever stop to think about language, it's an amazing thing because you have symbols that represent things. You look at the alphabet and you realize somebody designed this so that each letter represents a sound. When I started to teach my children to read, I caught a little bit of it because I homeschool them. So I learned that I had to teach them, first of all, the shape of a letter. Then I started to teach them the sound of the letter. Then I started to teach them how to put one sound with another sound and to associate the sound with the symbol. And little by little, I saw their minds picking up little by little. But it's a sophisticated process. DNA is the most sophisticated language in the universe. It's made up of single units like letters that you put together to form words, to form sentences, to form paragraphs, to make complete books. And those books are the instructions how to make your body, how to put your eyes in the right place, your ears in the right place, how to make your fingernails out of keratin, how to make blood vessels. Everything, the instructions are there inside of this DNA. Marvelous instructions, detailed, fine print. Who created this sophisticated information? Anyway, this man Anthony Flew, most of the scientists that you read now, the evolutionists who have converted to Christianity, it's because of DNA. They've seen DNA. They've begun to look at it. And I ask myself when I look at it, I say, how does the mind of an atheist work? How is it possible that you learn information and you never stop to think about how can this be? Now you tell me if I'm somebody special. that when I see something, I ask myself, how and why? Am I special? Are people in general so foolish that they look at things and they just take it like that and they don't think about what they're hearing or what they're seeing? You have to wait till you're an old man after you have fed your mind on evolution. Finally, when you are in your 70s, you start thinking. And what is as simple as ABC comes and taps you on the shoulder and you turn around and realize the truth. It's amazing to me. And I can only say it's because Satan has a way of blinding people. It has to be, because I don't see how rational people can look at life and think that you evolved from a bit of slime. Absolute lunacy. Anyway, what I'm saying is that this system takes over the world, this evolutionary system, so that we come to a place in time where the world is largely atheistic. And I'll tell you something else. Don't leave this out of the picture. I'm sorry to put it this way, but these lunatic evangelicals in America, are the tools of Satan to make people hold Christianity in contempt. Okay? If you have seen some of these videos where they are prophesying over President Trump, they are laying hands on him, they are speaking in tongues, they are striking, and they are, you look at these people, and I am a Christian, and when I see them, I cringe. I say, good Lord, am I to be associated with that? Mindlessness, silly behavior. And so people, you know, and then you have the television system, the movie industry, which has been systematically presenting Christians as charlatans, as devious criminals. I mean, I heard of this show called Elma Gentry, where the villain was supposed to be some pastor, I think, or some prominent church person. You have the Catholic Church, which has been so guilty of abusing little boys. So many tales of this, so many things coming out of Babylon that has turned the minds of people against Christianity. So what the Bible is telling us is that the world comes to the place where they have eliminated Christianity. And this is where the beast is able to raise his head and to finally do his job, which is to destroy Christians. He comes out of the bottomless pit and he shows his true nature again.
Question.
Go ahead, Brother Ian.
So is this the reason why, based on what you have just said, is this the reason why the beast now turns around and destroys the woman? Because the woman is riding, and that you just mentioned what came out of Catholicism and Babylon that turns people's mind away from religion and Christianity. So is this the reason why the beast now is able to destroy the woman?
I believe so. I believe that it's why the beast is able to, and also why the beast wants to. You know, the beast and the woman have been in an adulterous relationship for millennia. But at the end, when atheism or godlessness becomes the order of the day, the woman is no longer useful, because when is she useful? She's useful when the people believe in her. Okay, when religion, for example, has been able to bring the people into line and to use the people for the pleasure of the government. You know, religion has always been a factor that has been important to people, and so political powers have found an alliance with religion useful. But what if the world turns against religion? What if the people no longer want to have anything to do with religion? Then religion is no longer useful to the government. So the government gets rid of the baggage, it sheds the baggage. What I think they do, first of all, they take away the property from these churches, they take away the money, they freeze their accounts, they I don't think it's literally that they go around burning down churches. But even in Europe today, many of the churches are now dance halls. They are now places of political or of amusement. They are no longer places of worship because nobody is going there anymore. So already the influence and the power of Babylon is being taken away. But it's to be something that is deliberately done by this beast power. Deliberately take away all the advantages of Babylon and, as it were, loot her, burn her with fire, and make her naked. So this is the reason why it happens, because she has lost her popularity and the waters of the river Euphrates are dried up. That's what it signifies. The support of Babylon is gone. So the beast turns on Babylon. So in other words, it's not just God's people who are going to be persecuted. This is an idea that I had in my mind at the beginning, because I used to believe that the persecution would come from false Christianity. This is how it has been in the past. False Christianity stirs up the political powers to attack God's people. But in the last moment of time, remember, both the woman, false religion, and true religion are attacked. So the enemy is not the false religion. The enemy of God's people is not false religion. It's the secular power. It's the beast. And the greatest example of what it's going to be like is the destruction of Jerusalem. We have done a study on this before where we talked about the abomination of desolation. But briefly, what it is that if you look at the destruction of Jerusalem, you will see the pattern for the destruction at the end. There were three powers involved in the destruction at the time of Jerusalem's destruction. There was the Roman power, there was the Jewish nation, and there was the Christian church. Three powers, three elements. The Roman power represented the beast. The Jewish church represented Babylon, and the Christians represented the remnant. Now, the Jewish church and the Romans were friends at one point, because the Jews used the Romans to crucify Jesus. They were in an adulterous relationship and they killed the Son of God. So they were friends at first, just like Babylon and the beast. The Jewish church became the Babylon of that day. But the romance came to an end, and they had a disagreement, and so the beast came against Babylon, the Romans came against Jerusalem, and the Christians happened to be caught in the same place because they had not yet come out of Babylon physically. So what did God do? God made a break in the hostilities, and Jesus had told his people, when you see this happen, get out of there fast. And the same thing happens in Revelation, because God is saying, when certain things happen in Babylon, come out of Babylon, my people, get out of there fast. It's the same situation, because in Jerusalem, if they had stayed there, they would have been partakers of the destruction. But they got out of Jerusalem and they were preserved. In the same way, God's people are in Babylon. Many of them, they are told to come out of Babylon so they don't end up in the general destruction at the end. When Babylon is wiped out, they are not partakers of that devastation. So anyway, so we see that
But following that trend, Brother David, I like that that parallelism, or the type on the types. What happened if we were to follow that same trend is that the beast, after it destroyed Jerusalem, it turned around and began to persecute God's people.
Well, don't we expect that to happen?
Pardon me?
Don't we expect that to happen?
Yeah, I'm going to say that after they destroyed, in the same way that after they destroyed the woman, the beast turned to the Christian. I'm saying that it happened that way in the past.
And it will happen that way in the future.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a problem for us, but not a problem with the prophecy. So anyway, so it's a perfect parallel to what we see will happen. Of course, this time, God will put a stop to it forever, because this time it will be the coming of Jesus that will put a stop to the beast. We see that in chapter 19. In the time of the early church, it was the beginning of a long period of persecution, but not so this time. This time it is the end. But we have this to go through. So the beast comes out of the bottomless pit, and it says, they that dwell upon the earth shall wander, whose names were not written in the book of life of the Lamb, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is to come. So apparently, this resurrection of the beast is a cause of great wonderment. It's not something people expect again. And maybe I can kind of understand, because listen, if you tell me, I've seen pictures where they say that America has certain places where they are creating camps, FEMA camps. And I've seen people say that they see trucks carrying guillotines. I don't know if I'm to believe these things. I mean, you have conspiracy theories that some of them don't have any basis. But I'm sure you have heard the stories. They say they have heard that they are buying guillotines and what have you and what have you. And I, who live in the 21st century, I say, nonsense. The world will not go back to that. That's what I think. But is it possible? Does the Bible give me reason to believe that at least the same kind of attitude will be displayed again? Will it ever reach a place where the American government, these people that stand up for liberty and talk about equality and all the rest of it, and they have promoted this for decades, will it ever come to the place where this government and the developed democracies of Europe will come to the place where they kill people because of your religious belief? Is that possible from a human perspective?
Absolutely. They're doing it now, slowly.
And under this guise. Well, I agree with you, Brother Matt. We know it's going to happen. I mean, but humanly speaking, it looks very difficult, like it's something you think could never happen. As you say, they are doing it, okay? Sometimes a little news is leaked and you're amazed to find out that they have been torturing people, doing things that you could never imagine, these sophisticated powers. But at the same time, they do it secretly because they know that there is going to be a great outcry if they do it publicly. But at the same time, the spirit of humanity is still there. It doesn't change. And what God is showing us is that this spirit is going to intensify and multiply when his spirit leaves the world. So when this persecuting power emerges again, everybody in the world is astonished. They wonder. It's amazement, but it seems to be also approval, because they're happy that the government has the power and the courage to discipline these dissenters. That's one of the reasons why they are happy for the re-emergence of the beast with his power. They are glad that these dissenters are now being disciplined, that something is being done about them. So it goes on to say, and here is the mind which has wisdom. There are several places in Revelation where this phrase appears. What it is doing, it is asking us to understand that special insight is needed at this point. Why? I suppose because people always come up with different interpretations. Like when it talks about the number of the beast, it says, let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast. And here it talks about a mind which has wisdom. So let's look at this description carefully. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. So the woman here is Babylon. It's false religion. And we say this false religion goes all the way back to the Tower of Babel, from ancient Babylon. So the 7 heads represent 7 great systems. I'm going to go to a diagram that I have. Give me a second because I don't actually have the diagram up on the screen, but I'm going to have to look for it here. But I want to use this diagram because, all right. Give me a second. All right. I'll have to stop this one, start it again. All right, yes. Now this diagram is kind of like, I've tried to do this in a diagrammatic way. I want to discuss it and then we'll actually look at the Bible again. Look at what it says. It says a woman sits on 7 heads. And the 7 heads are on the beast. And these 7 heads represent the career of the beast. And what do we mean by this? It means that the beast, you don't see the beast as the beast until you come back to the last moments of time. Here's what it says. There are 7 heads, 5 are fallen. The 5 that are fallen are represented by these green circles. If you notice, I've kind of labeled them. The first one is Egypt, Assyria. Third one is Babylon, then Medo-Persia, then Greece, then Rome. And for head number 7, I've put a question mark, the yellow head. That one has not yet come, according to where John is in the prophecy. The red one, the red circle, is the red head, which is the one that is. Now, let's see if we can kind of see why we have this diagram and what we can conclude from it. So the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And there are 7 kings. These 7 mountains also represent 7 kings. And I'm understanding that to mean 7 kingdoms or 7 empires. Why does God call them mountains? Because in the book of Isaiah and in several of the Old Testament prophecies, nations are represented as mountains. Babylon was represented as a mountain. Zion was represented as a mountain. God's people, Israel, was represented as a mountain. So 7
Also,
mountains.
the mountain that was cut out without hands, it became a mountain on the earth in Nebuchadnezzar's dream.
Thank you, Brother Matt. That's another very good example. So what we are looking at is 7 nations or 7 empires. And what it is telling us is that these 7 heads exist on the beast. So therefore, the career of the beast has been defined by 7 great incarnations. Let me explain that. It means that the career of the beast has been manifested through 7 nations or 7 empires. And we have given names to these empires. Now, during that period, there has been a third element, which is the woman. The woman has been sitting on the heads. She has been riding the beast, or you could say the beast has been carrying her. So a few weeks ago, somebody asked, is the woman controlling the beast, or is the beast manipulating the woman? And I would say it's a reciprocal relationship. But if you ask me, I will say that Satan's chosen agency is the beast. So I think that the beast is really the more powerful entity. And this is demonstrated because at the end, the beast actually attacks the woman and wipes her out. So the beast is a stronger entity. So since the beast is Satan's agent, Satan's baby, as it were, the beast is a greater element. But what happens is that the woman has created a relationship with the beast. The woman should have been God's agency, but she has been corrupted and join the beast for advantage. She rides on the back of the beast, and so the beast has used her conveniently. That's the bigger picture. Now, what do we see at the end here? At the end, we see the 10 horns. And in this diagram, you might ask, why do I put the 10 horns here? Because the horns are not on the heads. Normally, if you have horns, they would be on the head. But here I have not represented the horns as being on the heads. I've represented them as being on the beast, but not on the heads. And there's a reason for this. We're actually going to look at the verses in a moment. But the verse says that the 10 horns have received no kingdom as yet. Think about this. So when you have head number 1, are the 10 horns there? No. When you have head number 2, are the 10 horns there? No. In the time of Babylon, were the 10 horns there? No. What about the time of Medo-Persia? No. Time of Greece? No. Time of Rome? No. How do we know? Because the angel is speaking to John, and he has taken John to the time of the judgment of the whore, and he says, the 10 horns have received no kingdom as yet. Up to the time of Rome, the 10 horns have received no kingdom. So you could say, well, maybe these 10 horns are on head number 7. Let's see. What it says is that the 7th head has not yet come, but when it comes, it must remain for a short space. Then the beast is king number 8. If you don't understand what I'm saying, let me repeat it. There are 7 heads, but there are 8 ruling powers. 7 heads, but 8 ruling powers. Ruling power number 8 is not a head, but ruling power number 8 has been a part of all the other heads. So the beast has been there during the career of all these 7 heads, but at the end, the beast does not appear as another head. In the end, he appears as the beast in his true nature. And at this time, how does he operate? He operates through 10 horns. Not through a head, but through 10 horns at the end. So these 10 horns appear at the very end, after head number 7. Then the 10 horns appear, and the beast appears with his 10 horns, and that's the final nature of the beast. When he comes out of the bottomless pit, it will be with 10 horns, and he will destroy the woman. Those 10 horns will attack the woman, take her out of the way, and that's the final incarnation of the beast. So this is the picture that I would like to present. And now I'm going to go to the Bible, and we will read those verses, and if we don't see this in the Bible, then you can correct me. Oh, I need to bring up the Bible again. I closed it. All right, give me a second. Okay. So we are at verse 9. Let's go down to verse 10. All right, from verse 9. And here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. We discussed that. And there are 7 kings. If you look at any other version, it will tell you these 7 mountains are 7 kings or 7 kingdoms. So the 7 mountains are not literal mountains. Normally you will hear in some interpretations that these 7 mountains represent 7 hills that the city of Rome is built upon, because they believe that this beast represents Rome. And so the 7 mountains are the 7 hills of Rome. Again, you come to Revelation and you are using a simplistic explanation. You are taking the literal hills to mean literal mountains. But you're already told that these 7 mountains are also 7 kings. So the mountains and kings, you have to equate them. In what way are mountains equal to kings? If you say mountains represent nations, kings represent kingdoms. You see that in Daniel 7 verse 23. Kingdom, mountain. We're talking about these 7 empires.
Brother David, in
Yes,
addition to that, it says 5 are fallen, and we don't know of the hills of Rome, any of the hills of Rome that have fallen.
thank you. Exactly. Exactly. Right. But normally people who say this, what they do, they separate the 7 heads from the 7 kings. They use the word there, which is kind of like complete out of context. What they say is the 7 heads are 7 mountains. And in addition to these 7 mountains, there are also 7 kings. That's how they would read it. But you see, as I said, every other translation will tell you it means they, the same mountains, are also 7 kings. So that avenue is not there. Now, as you say, it says 5 are fallen. These were the 5 green heads that we were looking at, the 5 green circles. One is, that is the red one, and the other is not yet come, that's the yellow one. And when the yellow one comes, he continues a short time. Now, let me tell you my understanding of this. I understand that these 6, right up to Rome, Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, Rome, number 6. And then number 7, I understand to be, this is my thinking, and I'm thinking that I'm probably correct. I could be wrong, but I'm thinking that head number 7 is the European Union. And why do I think this way? Because head number 7 continues for a short space, and it is during the period when the beast is not. And the only time in the history of Europe that it has not persecuted, when it has been a kind of unified power and it has not persecuted God's people, is under the European Union. I mean, that kind of wholesale, widespread persecution that you had in the past. The European Union has not been guilty of that so far. They have been guilty of great blasphemy, some things that they have said, but they have not yet become a persecuting power. And it's that time where it appears that the beast is dead, because his head received a deadly wound. The Roman head received a deadly wound. And we see that the wound has been repaired because Europe is coming together. Rome has come together again as a unified body, but not perfectly unified. It's a shaky kind of unity. And then it is going to fall. And there will emerge the beast in its true nature at the time of the close of probation. We are going to see pure, raw godlessness in Europe. That's what I think is going to happen. And like I say, we are dealing with unfulfilled prophecy, and I'm not speaking as a prophet. So I acknowledge that I could be wrong. But when I look at this, this is what I see as the most likely scenario. Now, we're at verse.
Would you say
11.
that?
Let me read
Would you
verse.
say that we're under
I hear you. Just a minute.
number 7?
Just a minute. I'm going to read verse 11 down to verse 12, and then I'm going to make a connection with Daniel. I'm going to go back to Daniel and make a connection. So if I forget, please remind me. Go ahead, Ian.
Yes, thank you. Are you saying that we're on the head number 7 now? The 7th head?
That's what I think generally. Yeah, that's what I think. Now it says the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th. We looked at the diagram, and that's what I pointed out. He is of the 7 because he existed during the time of all 7 heads, and he will go into perdition. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings or 10 kingdoms, which have received no kingdom as yet. So up to head number 6, they have received no kingdom, but they will receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. Now I'm saying that this is not under head number 7. Why? because the beast does not resurrect from the bottomless pit until after head number 7 goes. Then the beast comes up as king number 8. He will become king number 8. The beast that you saw that was and is not, he is king number 8. He's not head number 8 because there are only 7 heads, but he's king number 8. And when he becomes king, the 10 horns, which have received no kingdom as yet, they will receive power for 1 hour with the beast. These are 10 end time powers. These are not the 10 nations of Europe that were in the past, because those 10 nations were thrown, 3 were thrown down by the little horn, and they lost their influence and power. These are end time powers, because it says, "These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings." This is talking about the last battle in Revelation 19. These 10 horns, these 10 kings are there. They are the ones that devastate the prostitute, which has not happened yet. We see that in Revelation 18, it has not happened yet. So these horns are 10 end time powers. Now, I'm going to do something that I'm not too sure about and that I have not done before. But while I was doing this, I was looking at these passages. I was tempted to go back to Daniel 11. It comes more clearly to my mind that Europe, the powers of Europe represent the beast. And when you look at the book of Daniel, the European power is referred to over and over as the king of the north. People always ask me about the king of the north and what do I think about the king of the north. And I always say, I don't know. And that's because I don't know. But I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, and I'm just going to throw some ideas out there. All right. I know that when I do this, it sometimes causes confusion. I should wait until I have clearly defined ideas before I begin to throw them out. But I'm going to do that this evening and hope that we don't get confused. All right. Look at what it says about the king of the north. It says in verse 37, "Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers." That's a strange statement. If you think that this is a papacy, I have to ask, how does that apply? Which God of his fathers does the Pope or the papacy not acknowledge? It says, "Nor the desire of women." They normally say that that means that the Catholic Church will not allow their priests to get married. Kind of like a stretch, but we could say, okay, all right, fine. But it says, "Nor regard any God." How does that apply to the papacy? Because their God is the Trinity. "For he shall magnify himself above all." Look what it says in verse 38, a strange phrase. "But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces." This phrase, the God of forces, is a strange phrase. It goes on in verse 39, it says, "Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory." How do you apply that to the papacy? It says, "A God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver, precious stones and pleasant things." What if the God of the beast, the God of the king of the north, is this new God of science? Is this new God? It's an evolutionary God, the God of forces. This phrase sticks in my mind, the God of forces. Because the God of the world today is different. What men worship today is their science. Even if you look at some of the issues that are before the world today, all right? Everything is about science. Computers, telephones, WhatsApp, microchips, vaccines, everything. The worship of the world today is the God of science. That is what they look to for their help. They look to God for their development. They have mapped out the human genome. They are now able to do anything. What they're planning to, they're able to clone people, clone animals. What they are planning to do next is create life. The God that men worship today is the God of science. I'm thinking that this is the God of the beast, because the beast is against religion. The beast is a scientist. The beast is similar to what happened in the French Revolution, where they outlawed religion and they turned to human reason. This is the God of the king of the north. That's what I'm thinking. Because
Agree.
it said,
Explain the north.
well, the north was simply the geographic locations where the two kings actually located themselves. One of these kings, these Grecian kings, was located in Rome and in that part of the world. The other one was located down in Egypt. So God identified them as king of the north versus king of the south. And even today, geographically, Europe is still north of Egypt and Africa and that part of the world. And I'm going to explain the king of the south so you can get the connection. All right. So it says, and at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. So throughout the history of this chapter, Daniel 11, the king of the south has been the power that lay southeast of Europe. At different times, it was located at Egypt. It was first of all in Egypt. And then it moved a little bit here or there, but it was generally speaking south of Europe. Right now, today, south of Europe is Africa. And the Middle East is southeast of Europe. So what the Bible tells us, if we can accept that the beast is the king of the north, and the king of the north represents the European power, that makes sense to me. Of course, many of our people believe that this is a papacy, but as I pointed out, this description of this strange God, it doesn't fit. But it would fit if you think that it is secular Europe. Furthermore, we have seen from our studies of Revelation that the beast and the woman are not the same. So in my mind, the beast is absolutely not the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is included in the woman that rides the beast. So the king of the north is not Catholicism, it's the beast. So the king of the south pushes at the king of the north. What are we looking at? I am now beginning to agree with the people who say we are looking at an Islamic invasion of Europe. I'm now beginning to think that that is correct, because the power to the south of Europe is predominantly Islamic. Those nations are predominantly Islamic. South and southeast, you have Libya, you have Egypt, you have those Middle Eastern nations that surround Jerusalem, the Palestinian nations. They are generally Islamic nations. And what is happening is that Europe is presently being invaded by Muslims. Now, I'm not going to argue about the politics and the racism from that point of view. I'm not going to argue about this. What I know is that more and more in Europe, people are becoming afraid of the inroads of Islam into European culture, into European government, because it's a very real problem. I am not biased. I mean, no, I am biased. I'm not racist, but I am afraid of Islam. I will tell you this. I am afraid of Islam. And I don't mean afraid as a Christian. I mean as a human being. I don't like it when Islam begins to grow in power, because it is a religion that is intolerant of others, but it feeds on your tolerance to build itself. You can, there are certain Islamic countries where if you go there and you share a tract with somebody, you can be executed. This is the way Islam is in those places where it has a lot of authority and power. When Islam comes into your country, they build their mosques and they live peacefully. And I'm not talking about individuals, because there are people who are in every religion who are very peaceful and very loving. But the religion itself fundamentally is intolerant, and it's a dangerous religion. And they have been invading Europe systematically, taking over. The European population is going down, the native European population, and the Muslim immigrants, they are multiplying by leaps and bounds. In about 30 years, Europe will be Islamized. In about 30 years, if things continue. And Europeans are becoming afraid of it. So I am of the opinion that it's not just that Islam is carrying out terrorist attacks, right? Even in the places where they go to live. If you look at France, what happened, all right? They keep blowing up places. They blew up the printing places where they, in France, free country, free European country, they put some cartoons of Muhammad in the papers. The Muslims blew up the printing place, killed 12 people. They say it was a fanatic or a few fanatics who did it. But it's the nature of the religion. Salman Rushdie wrote a book about the Quran called the Satanic Verses. They put a death threat on his head. He had to be hiding all over the world. They're looking for him anywhere he goes. It's a dangerous religion. It does not believe in freedom. I believe Europe is going to awaken. The beast is going to awaken. The king of the north is going to awaken, whether because of the terrorist attacks or because of the growing influence of Islam. The king of the north will come against him. I believe the beast will attack Islam. And it goes on to talk about how comprehensive, without going into details, it talks about the land of Egypt shall not escape. He will have power over the treasures of gold and silver. Egypt, Libyans, Ethiopians, generally speaking, it's focusing on an attack against Islamic countries. So the reason why my mind went in this direction is because I've had a hard time identifying the king of the north specifically. But it kind of just came to me that if we are reasoning logically, and the king of the north is the last great power and the last great enemy, and it's a European entity, then obviously this king of the north is a European power. It must be the same power. This king of the north must be the same power. Now, as I said, I just dropped this in there by the way, because it's an idea that I want to explore more fully, and I want to work out the details and then share this some other time. But I thought, let me throw the embryo of what I'm thinking out there. And I know it's not original with me, because I actually heard this idea
Brother
about
David.
Islam. I hear you, Sister Maria. Just a second. I actually got this idea about Islam from listening to some other people, but they present the king of the north as the papacy and Islam as the king of the south. And the only adjustment I'm making is that I'm saying it's not the papacy. It's the European power. It's the beast power. And it's a strong support of what I'm saying when you look at what it says about a strange God and the God of forces and a God that his fathers knew not. Because you can't fit those to the papacy. Go ahead, Sister Maria.
No, I was just I seen a short clip of video about the the Soviet Union is being like no the part the north part side of the world is controlled by Soviet Union and the south is controlled by United States. So could it be that the Soviet Union is controlling the north part and the south side is controlled by United States? What do you think?
I don't think so, because what we see when we look at Revelation, for example, what we see is that the United States and the beast are friends. Remember, the beast, the United States is represented as a false prophet, and they perform miracles to get people to worship the first beast. They are friends. And they are friends right up until the end, because when Jesus is coming again, I saw the beast and the false prophet gathered together to make war against the one that was sitting on the horse. So they are friends. Right now, America and the United States are and the Soviet Union are absolutely not friends. And they are political opposites, and they have no intention of it being otherwise. So I would not accept that uh, interpretation, Sister Maria.
Brother David,
Okay.
Yes, Brother Arthur.
one question. Where does China fit in all of this? Because I have a Bible, the Peshetive Bible, and it in Ezekiel 38, it identifies China in verse 1, in verse 2 rather. It says, Son of man, set your face against China and against the land of Mongolia, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him and say, and it goes on further down and speaks about the country of the north. Verse 5, it says, Gomer and all her army, the house of Tugomar, and the uttermost parts of the north with all their host, and many other people who are with you. Where does China come in all of this drama? Because we see the foundation on which China has been building is becoming a worldwide phenomenon. They have been doing their things secretively, and they have gotten to the point now where a lot of countries are becoming atheistic, communistic. They worship the state instead of worshiping God.
What chapter did you just read from?
Ezekiel 38.
All right, there's a reason why I ask you that, and the reason is that the nations you just read about, they are mentioned in Ezekiel 38 because they are going to attack Israel. That's the context of the passage. Now, if you say, or if anybody says that this is literal China, then you have to say that it's literal Israel. I don't know if you see where what I'm getting at. You have to be consistent. So if you say they are going to attack Israel, and they're going to God is going to rise up and defend Israel, then you can say this is literal China and literal Israel. You have to go back to the thinking that the Jews are still God's special people, and they're going to be the subject of an attack by China at the end of time, and God is going to defend the Jews against China at the end of time. But if you say this is not physical Jews, but it's spiritual Israel, then you have to apply China also in a spiritual sense. So in those prophecies of Ezekiel, this Bible has translated it as China and Mongolia, but in the King James Version it talks about Togarma and Gomer and some other names. But really, the general name given to them is Gog and Magog. Gog and Magog. It refers to those eastern powers that were above Israel, that were traditionally great enemies, distant, but they were mythical, almost mythical enemies. And so God speaks about them. But if you go to the book of Revelation, you find that Gog and Magog and this battle against Israel at the end of time is the last great battle against God's people. And Gog and Magog here are not the Chinese. They are the forces of the world gathered together to fight against God's people. Spiritually, they are Gog and Magog. Spiritually, they are Togarma and Gomer and whatever the names are. But it's not physical China. But to your question, what part does China play in the end time prophecy? And my answer is, I don't know. Because the history of the prophecies focus on two great entities and two great areas of the world. And those two entities are the beast and the false prophet. And generally speaking, the prophecy focuses on what we call the old world, Europe and the Middle East, and the new world, the Americas. That's what we see in the prophecy. Where is China? Where is India? Where's Australia? These are major geographical areas, but I don't see them mentioned in the prophecies. And if you ask me why, I will say because they are not major powers in terms of the ideological battles between God's people and the forces of Antichrist. Because you might have massive areas of the planet, you might have massive powers in the world, but do they play a part in the ideological battles between God and Satan? If they don't, then they're not going to appear. It's like when you look at the Old Testament, right? Babylon is highlighted, Assyria is highlighted, but we understand that there were other great nations, but they're not emphasized because they never came in contact with Israel that much. So that's the point. The prophecies are focused on the importance of nations in relation to how they affect the cause of God. So if you're looking at things politically, then China must figure and India must figure. But if you're looking at things religiously, in terms of religious ideology and how the shape and the image of God's business in the world changes, then apparently China doesn't figure. So that's the best answer I can give.
Thank you. I think you're right, because we understand that when the Bible speaks about Israel, it's not identifying Israel as a geographical location with respect to the end time happenings.
Absolutely. So we have to be consistent. All right. So I think this is where we're going to end for this evening. I'm going to end the recording, then we'll have our closing prayer.